back to another episode of Chatterbox with me, Mel Biggs. This is the podcast where every month I get to sit down with a brilliant folk musician from across the UK or Europe and interview them about who they are, the person behind the music and their teaching styles. My guest this month is the fantastic Lucy Huzzard. She is a Sheffield-based singer, dancer, musician extraordinaire. She is currently in a duo with her partner Hazel Thompson. Maybe you've heard of them, Lucy and Hazel. She dances English and Swedish and all sorts of stuff in between. She's a little techno goddess. We talk a lot more about techno music and I get to be educated about that scene. And we also both open up about some stuff that we've never really talked about or aired publicly before, so hopefully that will be of interest to you. But most excitingly, if you listen all the way to the end, we get to finally announce something very exciting about a collaboration that we're both working on for next year that maybe you want to get involved with. You're about to hear an interview that took place at 9:30 in the morning, which is not the musician's kind of time to shine. Certainly not for me. Lucy had been for a run, so without much further ado, let's get into it. Here's Lucy. Oh, this is a really early start for me. I don't know about you. Are you normally an early bird?
Do you know what? When I used to be in a job, like a salaried job, I used to be able to get up early, and I quit my job in April. And since then, I've been creeping back to my teenage sleeping pattern, which is watching Star Trek until 2 a.m. and then sleeping in. So not normally, but I did get up this morning and do the good things. I went for a run because I was I want to be fresh and ready for this. I know, take it very seriously.
Quite impressive, because I literally just rolled out of bed literally about an hour ago, ate some porridge and then just kind of slapped some concealer on and hoped for the best, to be honest.
You look glowing, don't worry.
Thank you. I haven't actually officially introduced you. Welcome to Lucy. It's really nice to have you. I know we've chatted quite a bit off air about what we want to discuss in this episode, and I knew as soon as I wanted you on as a guest and one of my guest tutors that I had tingles about the things that would allow me to talk about and kind of talk about. So I think for the listeners at this stage, we've got some things coming up that are going to be really exciting to divulge and introduce to you. But just start off by telling us, where have you been recently? I know that, Lucy and Hazel are really taking off as a duo. And talk to us a little bit about that and what you've been up to this year.
It's been a big year for me, I guess, because as I mentioned before, I quit my job in April, which I loved very much. I worked in a children's literacy charity in Rotherham called Grimm & Co. You should check it out if anyone's in Rotherham. It's fantastic. But I just felt the call of music. It'd been knocking on my door for a long time and I've been ignoring it, and I thought it's time. And as you said, I'm in a duo with my partner Hazel Thompson, and it's just got to that point where if we wanted to give it the time that it needed, I needed to invest way more into it. So basically in April I left my job. We did up our van, crusty musty, big yellow Mercedes Sprinter. We did that up in the spring, and then we went away for about 3 months in the summer and did a summer of festival gigs, meeting people, playing music, giving ourselves the space that we wanted, and it was pretty cool. And I've just landed back in Sheffield in September and getting settled back into living in a house.
So what's coming up for you this autumn? Have you got anything in the pipeline?
So this autumn, the duo, we're taking a bit of a pause from gigging because we're booking for a spring tour, and we're consolidating and applying for funding and stuff like that. And then I'm doing loads of ceilidh depping. I dep for 2 ceilidh bands and I'm in a third one, and I'm doing quite a lot of teaching at Cecil Sharp House, which is nice, covering for the one and only Hazel Askew. Which I love because, her classes, they're always lovely to me and really kind. And it's always just nice to go and nerd out with other Melodeon players. So I'm doing a bit of that. And then me and Hazel actually have a residency at Cecil Sharp House in December. We applied for an FDUS grant bursary and a week's residency, which we got, which is really exciting.
I saw that on your socials. So what does that give you license to do? Is it just space use and you can do whatever you want, or if they're kind of is there a project you're going to be part of at C Sharp House?
So basically the proposal we put in, because I should have said we kind of write our own sort of political folk songs. That's kind of what we do as a duo. We've just released an EP, which we're really happy with. We're going to be officially releasing it in the new year, but it's kind of, if you come to our gigs you can buy it basically. But we have an album. We have an album on the horizon, material about land rights, land justice. It's something that we're both really interested in. We've both been involved with a show called 3 Acres and a Cow, which is an amazing kind of part lecture, part storytelling part kind of song concert about the history of land, like 1,000 years of land justice and injustice in England, England, Scotland, Wales, and a bit of Ireland as well. So we're both really interested in like land justice, the right to own movement, housing crisis, all the things that intersect with that. And we would like to write an album of material that has the kind of broad umbrella theme of that. So the residency will hopefully give us some time to like research and develop some material for that, which would be exciting.
Incredible. I think what's been most exciting for me to kind of witness in this like new revival of Lucy Huzzard, if you like, kind of over the last few years since you've got working with Hazel, is it feels to me like very current folk music. It's like folk music that would have been written 200 years ago about the current issues that folk music was, you know, dealing with then. And I almost wonder, in my mind, it feels a little bit of a dangerous way to go with, you know, presenting current media to an audience, you know, in that sense of through the lens of folk music. But it is what folk music is about, and I don't deny that it has its place. But I think it's just the way that I've processed it and internalised it. For me, if I was that person getting up and singing about current affairs, I don't know if I've got a strong enough character somehow. I don't know if I've got the words. I don't know how I would express myself in that realm. So I really admire you both for just tackling that, you know, and being brave enough to go a bit sideways with it. It feels, you know, from kind of where people tend to be more revivalists, they're singing older material, maybe finding old songs that reflect current situations, which for me feels a bit safer. But it's just, I'm just personally, you know, that's kind of where I've been coming from, but still admiring the fact that people like yourself and Grace Petrie are out there writing current material for current issues. Is that something that you had to come to terms with in your own self?
It's a really good point that you make, and I do agree in a lot of ways with what you're saying, that maybe more people are finding older material that feels relevant today, whether it's about migration, the refugee crisis, misogyny and patriarchy. You know, you do hear people kind of finding old songs that are still fresh and relevant. I think for me and Hazel, like, although I'm a born and raised folkie, I think I came at this entire project from a more punk angle. It came kind of for me out of a burning necessity to kind of get out some of my feelings about the state of the world. I do see there are people like Maddie Morris is another one who's writing really explicit, beautiful, relevant current folk music about like the queer experience, for example, and I absolutely rate Maddie. I think they're fantastic. So there are people doing it. I don't feel like I've had to come to terms with it. I feel like it just sort of burst out of me, and to be honest, you know, as a performer, you get validation as you perform. And we've had such good feedback from audiences. I expected a lot more heckling and a lot more kind of grumbling, or people coming up to us after gigs and saying, oh, I think you'll find blah, 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 blah. And honestly, people just are really needing like honest, relevant music, I think. That's the response that we're getting anyway. And I think if we were getting more grumbling and heckling and complaints or whatever, then I think I would feel a little bit insecure. But the wealth of audiences are just really excited to hear it, and I think things are dire out there. We're facing like an apocalyptic climate crisis, and I think there's no point beating around the bush. Just say it like it is, you know.
Absolutely.
You can take that, I think.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice point, that if you're kind of bolstered by your audience's response, it kind of means that it leads you onto this path of, oh, well, we're doing the right thing for us anyway. And you would have been, you know, just about finding your crowd, isn't it? And I know that you don't necessarily just play pure folk festivals. You're doing, like I say, this kind of sideways movement. And I guess that's where you find your people. And
yeah, totally. It's been interesting. I think we actually haven't played to that many of the like more folky crowds, and we did Cambridge and Sidmouth this summer, and you know, they're quite sort of big name folk festivals, and I was a little bit surprised that we got booked. I was like, oh, you sure? Like, have you heard us? We're quite like, we swear a lot. And I was a bit worried, and people loved it. You know, again, people all over the place apparently just really want to hear honesty, honest, straight up, say it like it is music at the moment, and I think that reflects the times that we're in.
I think the world has always needed really brave people to speak the truth, because we don't get a lot of that. We get a lot of people that manipulate the truth for their own gain, and it's not actually, you're just reflecting what the world is going through, and it kind of, in a soothing way, in a way, you know, people are sat nicely in a concert venue watching you on a stage, and there's like maybe a beer in their hand. You know, that's kind of a nice environment to be with your own thoughts and trying to escape the world generally, but also be confronted with it through the lens of entertainment. I think it helps people to process what they're going through and really think about it in a different way.
And something that we do that maybe not as many people, I think Grace Petrie does this, is we at least try to be quite funny. You know, we've got a couple of songs that I would put in the like comedy song bracket. I think Blind Boy, actually, if you know his sort of podcast, he talks about like how comedy is sometimes devalued in the arts. It's kind of like lower or lesser, or if something's funny, then it's not as serious. And actually, I really disagree with that. I think that like comedy is really important part of facing the truths of the world, and like having something like really harrowing and upsetting, and then being able to like find some dark comedy in things sometimes is a really good way of processing.
It's a great vehicle for communication, I think, as well.
Yeah, exactly. And people love a silly chorus, and
Yeah.
you know, it invites people in. It doesn't just give people a kind of devastating message without hope. You know, I think the main thing that I like people to feel after our gigs is like hope and galvanization and joy in each other. You know, that's more important to me than just kind of giving people all doom and gloom.
Yeah, we don't need any more of that. So it's really
No.
clever. It's clever how you've been able to go about and like presenting these things. And I've loved the songs that I've heard so far. And I can't wait for this full album. And, you know, to know that that's coming is very exciting. So everyone needs to look out for that.
Yes.
Keep following Lucy and Hazel on socials, guys. There'll be links to all of that down below. I met you years and years ago when we were like probably teenagers, I can imagine. I remember seeing you across the bar at Shrewsbury Folk Festival. And this was at a period of my life where I was incredibly insecure about myself. You know, it's changed, but I'm still insecure about myself. And I can remember looking at you and thinking, God, she's so cool. She could never be somebody that I could hang out with. I never really approached you. I think the first time I properly met you was 2018 at the Polska weekend in Sheffield, which I would love to talk about all of that in a second. But just tell us a little bit about where you've come from in folk world. I know that your mum, obviously, Val, you know, is very heavily involved in Morris and Sheffield and stuff.
Yeah.
So, like, naturally you were born into it. But how has it all panned out for you from the beginning?
In a very folky way. Yeah, so my mum's a Morris dancer, and she got into Morris in the 80s through the kind of women's movement in Sheffield, and started up the first kind of all women's team, definitely in Sheffield, which thought was very cool when I was a kid. And I used to tell all the kids in my primary school that fact, and they were like, I literally don't care. I thought that was very cool. I thought it made her a rock star.
What side was that, by the way?
Broomstick Morris. They were very cool. They were rad. They did a lot of the anti-nuclear stuff. They were sort of involved in the sort of politics and CND stuff as well in Sheffield, I think, in the 80s. Yeah, very cool. So I was raised in a very folky family. It's my mum, at least. And we would go to Whitby and Sidmouth and all the folk festivals every summer, all of my life. And I grew up as a very folky teenager. As soon as I found things like Folkworks and actually Ethno England, which was going when I was a teenager up in North Yorkshire, I kind of met my like folk teenage peers like Kevin Lees and Joe O'Connor and these wonderful people who've gone on to have, you know, big music careers and just be excellent people. And Hazel Askew as well. So I really, you know, was quite forged in like a very folky youth. I just kind of followed that path really. So when I got to university, I went on and did the folk degree, met more people, which was wonderful. And during my time at Newcastle, I got into rapper, as you do. And I was completely immersed in the like rapper scene for years, and it was just totally my life. I think if you do rapper, it kind of has to be your life.
It's all consuming.
It's all consuming because of the way that the dance works. Everybody's kind of got their own role in the dance, so you can't really let anyone down by like not going. I often think, if you've ever seen the film Bring It On, that's about cheerleading.
Yeah.
Just like that, but with swords, basically.
What kind of Morris have you done as well?
Now we're going into my embarrassing youth. So I ended up as a teenager playing for a team called the Jig Crew. Yeah.
I saw you guys. Where was that? Will Pound, and I can't remember. They were really good dancers. Yeah, great.
Simon Matthews, Will Pound, Stuart Giddens, Tim Yates, Sarah Matthews. Oh, who else was in it? It was quite a collection of like rapscallions, and we were proper lads. Like, that was the closest I came to like being a proper lad culture lad. We would just cause mischief, and basically the idea was that we only danced solo jigs. So I didn't dance, I played, and I loved it. The actual dance element of that, I absolutely loved playing for solo jigs, because there's such a like intense relationship between the musician and the dancer, and usually there's one musician and one or maybe two dancers, and you're completely locked in, and the timing of the piece that you're playing, the tune, will completely depend on when their feet hit the floor, how much they're going to like jump and do this next move, and I just loved it. For all the kind of boozing and laddish behaviour and stuff, I actually had a real love for the music and the dance. And that was for a few years, and we may have got kicked out of a couple of festivals.
Oh, really? Oh, I didn't hear about that.
Maybe. Nothing to do with me. Nothing to do with me. Blame the others. We had a great time, but, you know, we ended up going to uni and parting ways, and it sort of disbanded, I think, after a while. I have danced more very briefly. I danced with Castleton, who's an absolutely incredible women's team in Sheffield. By the time I was doing that, I was reaching the end of this kind of very enmeshed with the folk world part of my life. When I was like doing loads of rapper, I joined Kinnywood, which is a Northwest team.
Great team, yeah.
Kenilworth when I lived in Birmingham. I was certainly at a time when I was like doing loads and loads of folk dancing, and then I moved to Birmingham and basically discovered techno on an amazing new bunch of people who were not folky at all. And I just thought, maybe I want to do something else for a little bit, you know, and experience some other music and some other culture and some other stuff. So I guess at that point, I took a bit of a break. So I wasn't with Castleton for very long before I was like, actually, I'm going to do the thing that like other young people seem to be doing, which is going out and dancing to techno. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. And, you know, raved about techno for a long time. But
what was it that grabbed you about it? Was it the culture? Was it just the music? Was it the whole shebang? Or because it's not a world I know anything about. So take a little moment here to, you know.
Okay, so there's lots of different types of electronic music that people go out dancing to. Sometimes they will get bunched under techno, which is not the case. There's lots of things. There's jungle, drum and bass, house, loads of different things. Acid techno, which is great. Techno for me, like when it's good, is very symphonic. It's like a whole journey. And if you get a good DJ, you really want to stay for the whole set because they will have put something together that takes you on a real journey. And for me, like, it's quite meditative and maybe spiritual. Like, I would just get down to the front without earplugs, which you should never do. Always wear earplugs. Get down to the front and just kind of get immersed in the sound. And I just found it completely, like, almost spiritual, as I said, like, very moving, very, like, introspective. I just think it's beautiful. I think it's great music. And the scene's great. I mean, it's just, like, happy people having a nice time, going out partying together. Everyone's very kind. Techno is a bit more intellectual.
So we've talked a lot about kind of, like, your movement through folk and taking a break for techno, but how did Scandi dance and Swedish stuff get in there? Like, what point of your life were you like, actually techno's cool, but now I want to try some traditional Swedish dancing?
So around the same time that I got into techno, which is, I moved to Birmingham kind of on a bit of a whim for a year. I ended up working for the guy that runs mostly jazz, funk and soul and mostly folk festival. He runs both festivals, and I worked for him as a PA for about 9 months. Moved to Birmingham, met all these people, met techno, was having this wonderful time. And then I got a phone call from one of my absolute favourite people in the world, Andy Parr, who's an amazing concertina player, beautiful singer.
Shout out to Andy.
Yeah, oh, big love heart. What an angel. I'd already at this point been like going to things like Skint, which is the Scandinavian International Bal weekend in Derbyshire in the autumn. Been going there for a long time because of my mum, and like going to Bals, going to see like Bozabella. So I'd been doing a bit of this European folk dance stuff. I'd been to some of the like French festivals when I was in my early 20s and had a good time. And I was curious about Swedish music and dance, and I knew a few Swedes from like ethnos and stuff. And so I got this call from Andy just saying, "Hi, do you want to come to Sweden with me?" And I was like, "Oh, I've just moved to Birmingham, Andy. I've got a job. I've got new friends. Like, I'm having a really good time." He's like, "Oh, go on. I will. I'm gonna do this dance course. Like, just do it. Go on." And he's so bloody persuasive, honestly. And I'm very, very easily persuaded if someone's enthusiastic about something. As you probably know, Mel.
Jump on the hype train. Woo!
But within about 10 minutes, he'd convinced me to go and study Swedish folk dance for a year with him at the Erik Sahlström Institute in Tutor, which is just north of like Uppsala, which is north of Stockholm. And so I did. And so September of that year, which is 10 years ago this autumn.
Wow. Gosh, yeah, I can't believe it's been that long.
I know. Oh my gosh.
We're getting older.
Don't forget, we lost 2 years to the pandemic, so it doesn't count. It was 8 years ago. So yeah, I got on a plane and flew out to Sweden with an enormous suitcase and spent 9-10 months living in Sweden,
wow.
doing the Swedish folk dance every day,
I mean, tell me everything about it. Like so the culture of learning in a foreign language, the culture of learning in a different country. You've obviously done the folk degree. How did it compare to learning in England and learning folk stuff in England?
Great questions. Top headlines. I loved it. It was brilliant. Would do again. Would recommend to anybody vaguely interested in dance or Swedish music. Do it. Please go. It's amazing. So the aspect language. So there are quite a lot of international students come to that school. They've got the dance course, the fiddle course, and the nyckelharpa course. There's these 3 courses. There's maybe in total like 20-ish people in the school at the time, and you're all intermixed. You're all kind of living in your own little flat with a shared kitchen just in annex to the school, so it's very intimate. And because there's lots of international students from all over Europe, and like had American and Japanese students as well, they teach in English at the start of the year. And because of the Swedish education system teaches everybody English, most Swedish people have better English than English people.
Yeah.
So the tutors just taught in English, and then bit by bit they started to introduce more Swedish language, which was really nice. And meanwhile we're all trying to learn Swedish, and we're all doing our Duolingo, and trying. I'm really quite rubbish at languages. I don't speak fluently any other languages, but I did come as close as I could to fluency with Swedish, but never quite got there. So bit by bit they're teaching you more and more in Swedish. And also because we were doing dance, so much of it's physical, it actually was kind of easy. You could, they'd say a Swedish word and you'd be like, oh, it means you're doing that thing, because I could see that you were turning around, or you're using your left foot, or whatever. So I actually built a vocabulary of like Swedish dance words, really. That was the first Swedish that I spoke, was like words for like weight and bounce and force and relax and all these kind of things that come into dance. So the language stuff was actually all right. And if you needed to know anything or you didn't understand, you could just ask. So that was really cool. Gosh, what else do you want to know? I could just rave about it.
so my experience of learning through, I mean, kind of like 2 degrees of separation. I have not learnt in Sweden. I did visit in Stockholm the Skeppis house. Is it Skeppis? Yes.
Yeah.
And I went for an evening, and this was after I'd done the Polska workshop with you in Sheffield, and I think it was 2 years later, and I've not done Polska since your workshop. And I finally cracked Polska. I loved your weekend. It really sort of stripped everything back. And not just the dance Polska, it was like dance and movement in general was stripped right back. So yeah, I went and visited and did a dance. And it all came back. I danced with somebody who was also at the Eric Salstrom Institute. And I mentioned that, oh, do you know Lucy Huzzard, just in case? Like, no, they didn't. But I thought I'll name drop just in case. But I love I don't know, I think for me, this is something you really focused on in the Polska workshop, was contact, not just with other partners, but with the floor, your foot with the floor, and the feeling of motion through the dance, through your core. You really focused on the whole picture of dance. And I know I've said it to you thousands of times since, but every time I come to the dance floor now, in mostly a French dance context, because that's what I mostly do now, I still kind of come to the floor with that in mind, of like how my foot is rolling through, and like the contact points with my partner. And particularly I try and take more of a Swedish hold now, kind of like through the wrist more than through the hand, because it's a bit lighter and it just feels more, you can really feel the person and where they're going, and you can, as a leader, kind of offer a suggestion a little bit easier through the wrist, I find. And all of that detail, I mean, how was that for you, learning that for the first time? Or did you learn that elsewhere before you went? Or the types of dance as well, like how many different dances did you get to pick up?
Great question. So the first thing, it's so nice that knowledge has kind of stayed with you, because I think that's so fundamental.
I think because it's physical, like my physical memory is so much better than my mental memory. Like my body remembers, like for instance, going to Sweden 2 years later, and I can dance the Polska, even though my brain is like, oh my God, can I even remember the Polska? But my body could.
Great. I think that's the thing. If you embed something enough, your body remembers a lot for a long time. And I think dance is a really good example of that. Like the body, I mean, there's that book, isn't there? The Body Keeps the Score. It's about trauma, but
it's a great book.
The body does really remember things. And I think when you do something enough, like we did in Sweden, we did it for a year, every day. It's just there. It's in your body. And, some of those basic things were really the things that you mentioned about like whole body awareness in dance. It's not just I'm doing the Polska, but I'm moving through space, I'm dancing, I'm aware of the music, I'm aware of my body in relation to the other person. I'm as aware as I can be of the other person and their movements and where they're at and how much they want to do this dance and how much closeness they want, and all of this awareness. That was quite a revelation. I thought I was just going to go and learn the steps, and we spent the first month basically just walking solo, thinking about all of this stuff: posture, movement. You're not going 1, 2, you're moving the whole time. And how do you create a sense of constant movement even if you're not taking a step? Like, how is it that your body is always dancing even if you're standing still? All of this stuff. And they just took it slowly and did enough of it. There's so much repetition, and I'm so grateful for that. Because actually, as you mentioned, like, it'll stay on your body if you repeat that stuff.
Bal dancing in general, which I think for me incorporates Scandi, even though they are obviously separate dance forms, but those kind of more intuitive, connection focused dances, when you come to then compare or go back to English dance, which I still do, I still love my Morris and what have you, but nobody talks about contact. It's like you grab someone around the waist and you swing them, and it's like the conversation is different, and yes. Maybe it's evolving. I hope it is. I know that there's very much conversations in Ceilidh about contacts and consent to talk before you're dancing with somebody about how they like to be swung round and stuff like that, and I think that's really positive. But in general, I didn't grow up with that in the English scene. I discovered that when I started doing French dance.
Totally. I am really excited that some of these concepts that are already in more of the, we're talking more about consent. It's become more of a household term these days. I think that's really good. And people are thinking about how that maps onto all aspects of life, whether it's like sex or it's Ceilidh dancing, right? And I think, like, I did a Ceilidh on Saturday, and the caller, Rosie, she mentioned, it was at a wedding, she was like, whatever you do, just make sure that when you do this swing, however you do it, make sure that you're both, it's something you're both comfortable with. It's kind of hard to do that in the moment when you're doing a strip the willow and you just get like 3 seconds with a new person and then you're done. So that's an interesting thing to explore, whether the dance form allows space for that conversation to be had at all. But certainly I have been grabbed, I'm sure many people have, in Ceilidhs and in Bals in ways that I don't feel particularly comfortable with. The thing about like having a couple dance is you have a bit more time with a person, and you can say, oh, can you just move your hand, or like, hopefully if that person is intuitive and able to listen to you, then maybe they won't put their hand somewhere that you don't want in the first place. But just asking first is a really nice thing to do.
I think
oh, go on.
No, I was going to say in general for me, I think it's not really been a switch, but just I kind of changed track, and mostly I dance French dance and Bal and stuff now, because I find it is an easier space to have these conversations, and you're generally met with nice people who are open to that sort of as a suggestion. But most of the time I don't even need to ask, because there is just this general more air of respect. I haven't ever been groped in a Bal. I'm not saying that doesn't happen, but for me, I have never, whereas in Ceilidh I was. And I don't do English dance very much anymore, because not just because of that, there's different things as well, but it really did sort of make me question about going to Ceilidhs at festivals by myself as a young person, because some really crappy things happened, and I know that has happened for a lot of people. But Bal has always been a much more respectful space, and I think that's why I've really gravitated more towards it. And I'm not sort of saying anything against that. It's just kind of an expression of experience.
Well, it's what's happened. Like, it's not against anyone in particular, but there is a culture out there of perhaps a lack of awareness about how we meet each other's bodies in a dance environment, and we don't have conversations about it. As you say, there just isn't a culture of that in the English folk dance. I think one of the things I loved most about the course in Sweden was that there's, I don't know, maybe 10 people on the dance course, maybe less than that. And by the end of the year, I could probably tell, if I had a blindfold on and somebody took me by the little finger for a dance around the room and we had one little finger contact, I could probably tell who that person was. And I think we all felt that way about each other, because we'd spent so much time dancing together with our eyes closed, like following each other around the room with our eyes closed. And you can feel someone's gait and someone's weight and someone's tension. You really get to know somebody as a dancer.
But just literally through their little finger contact, it's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah, really cool. Really cool stuff.
That was another thing. I mean, you brought that to the Third Beat Dance Collective weekend, which I should say actually, yes, that was you and Andy Parr and Ella Sprung, who also did the course with you as well. That whole weekend, and I remember this exercise you did where you got there was like an inner circle and an outer circle, and the inner circle all had their eyes closed. and the outer circle just had to choose somebody and come up and take them for a drive, as you kind of described it. And it was just exactly what you said, taking people around the room and really looking after them and nurturing them. I think what I loved as well as the exercises was you really allowed for time for everyone to kind of have a moment to say how that was for you, and kind of have a moment for people to kind of express, oh, that was really interesting, or I felt like a real sense of duty of care over my partner, like leading them round. And it was just approaching leading and following from a totally different perspective that I'd never had with dance before. And I could bang on about the Third Beat Dance Collective weekends for ages. And are they coming back at all? I mean, I know that you're regularly busy, and Ella's got a little one now.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned, because me and Ella are going to do another one in Sheffield.
Oh my God.
We've just kind of booked it, and I'm about to start sharing the link. The link is live. On the 24th of November at St Mary's in Walkley in Sheffield, me and Ella will be doing a day Polska. Not a whole weekend, just a day. A Polska workshop that's suitable for all levels. So like the one that you did, we'll take people from like, don't know what a Polska is, through to maybe I can do a turn, hopefully, or somewhere along that scale anyway. It's going to be about 10 till 4, I think.
Oh my
A little
God.
break in the middle.
The perfect segue to, from all of this exuberance about it all, and then, oh my God, there is one. That's really exciting. I didn't know that, guys.
Hype.
So just say the date again.
The 24th of November.
God, okay, I'm going to put that in.
24th of November, St Mary's, Walkley.
Cool.
I'll give you a little link for that.
Brilliant. Well,
please come.
Yeah, I'm going to try and get there, because I can see that my kitchen might be fitted around that time, but I don't care. I'm going to leave it and come Polskering instead. Sorry to interrupt. Just wanted to let you know that there's been a massive chunk of this free public podcast edited out, but it's been made available in the extended episode, which is on my Patreon. You can sign up for as little as £4.50 a month to get access to this extended episode, plus the whole back catalogue from every other guest tutor. This month there's 14 minutes extra, and it comprises a funny anecdote about Will Allen and some cheerleaders, rapper culture, more about Lucy's time in Sweden, and various other conversations that I've had to shave down. You can sign up to my Patreon via the link in the show notes. Check it out below. Now back to the interview. So out on the Eric Sahlstrom Institute course, was there music involved as well? Obviously, I'm imagining that most of you dancers were also musicians, so there must have been like sessions and casual music, but anything kind of formalised, or how was it living in that culture and absorbing it with a melodeon? I mean, it's not a typical instrument that you find in Sweden, but they do exist, of course. And
yes, yeah, they do. There are box players in Sweden, not so many as there are in England, of course. But well, luckily for me, I had just that year bought my 3-row, so I had a kind of technically chromatic box, and I was just getting to grips with it, having had just a DG kind of 2-row up until then. So I had the kind of possibility of learning more of these tunes in like D minor and A major, that kind of thing. It was really brilliant actually for me. You're surrounded by music even though you're on the dance course, so all the other people you're living with are learning fiddle and nickel harper. There's lots of cross-pollination, little duos and bands formed. Like I was playing some like mazurka and teaching people some Frenchy stuff. There were little concerts throughout the year where we also did singing. So there was a lot of cross-pollination, and there were opportunities to play and jam throughout the year, and going into Uppsala and meeting the kind of folk scene there as well. As a melodeon player, it was fun. It was definitely challenging at times, and I do still find it challenging to find my place in a musical tradition that isn't melodeon driven. But one thing that I tend to do is look to kind of accordion players often, because there are lots of accordion players in the sort of Scandi tradition, and think, well, how are they doing it? Because they can't slide their notes, or they have the same, in some ways, some of the same limitations that I do, having a button instrument. I've been having a couple of lessons with my friend Ville Siri, who's a brilliant Swedish fiddle player, and I've had chats with him about like, oh, how do I make my melodeon really Swedish sounding? And he's a brilliant Swedish fiddle player, but he's just like, really, it's about making it your own and trying to get away perhaps from this like, it must sound like this to be Swedish. He used the word nest, which I really liked. How do you make your own nest in this tradition? Where are the places that you're playing? It's so nice, isn't it? That you're playing the way that you interpret these tunes, with respect to the tradition, and obviously respect to the rhythms and the things that make it what it is. But how do you find like your little nest in this place that fits your instrument, that you're not constantly fighting to sound like something that you're not? And I think that's an ongoing journey with anything.
But also lovely to hear because, again, outsiders'
yeah.
interpretation of Swedish folk music is particularly, obviously, it's a string-driven tradition and culture.
Yeah.
So there's a lot, in my mind, I've never really looked at any Swedish manuscripts, but from people I know who have, lots of bowing marks, lots of specific things of you must play it this way, and there are competitions that challenge you to play it in this way, so it, you know, to become the real Swedish player. But it's lovely to know that actually there is obviously still space for evolution and encouragement of expression and stuff.
I think there's a lot of cool stuff on the sort of Swedish folk scene that feels like it's not as traditionalist as people might think it is. There's a really cool trio called Raw, like R-A with a little circle above it.
They came over last year, I think. Yeah, I remember Anna
really
Pack
cool.
talking about them, yeah.
They're really there's I think it's 3 sax players maybe. Is that right? Or 2 sax and a fiddle. I saw them last year, and they're doing really kind of like dark contemporary jazz stuff that's vaguely sometimes folky, and you can dance to it, and it's really interesting, but they're not doing the traditional thing at all, I don't think. It's definitely traditionally informed, but you know, there are people doing really cool stuff with Swedish trad that I think, I don't know, maybe I'm not as much of a traditionalist as other people are, and I think that's okay. I think there's space in the tapestry of folk for everybody, right? And I'm much more of the like, everybody's welcome as long as you do it with respect and understanding, and you know, you do go to people who are of a tradition to like do a bit of learning, and you know, you are informed, but also make it your own.
It's great. I mean, obviously living there for so long, you would have come across so much and, you know, made so many contacts and really seen the real stuff, you know, not just like a blanket kind of coverage of it all. It's just you really got into it. I mean, it segues really nicely into what you're teaching on my Patreon this month. As people are listening to this, you will be able to get the replay of Lucy's Melinar. You are doing some Melodeon friendly tunes, and yeah, just sort of tell us a little bit about what people can expect from that.
I think I'd like to find maybe an early to Polska. So Polska's always in 3.
And it's like it's a 2. The second beat moves, doesn't it? In the Polska, we've not mentioned that.
Yeah. It's a whole thing, which maybe I'll save for the Melinar.
Yeah.
There's this thing where you have the 1, the 2, and the 3, and perhaps in a waltz it's kind of even 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And in Swedish music, sometimes that 2, if you imagine it's like on like an abacus, you can kind of move the 2 around, and where that 2 goes maybe determines the push or pull of a tune. So it might have a rhythm that's like 1, 2, 3, or 1, 2, 3. So for the Melinar, I think I'll try and find a tune that demonstrates that early 2, so that people can kind of hear it and be aware of it, maybe.
Yeah.
And something that hopefully that fits under the Melodeon. So going back to what I was saying about finding your nest, some tunes it feels like you're kind of fighting to make them fit on your instrument, right? And certainly with the Melodeon, I certainly feel like that's the case sometimes. I can just play it just about, but I never feel like it's really under my fingers. And I would like to teach a tune that people can really like settle into, that feels like it fits really nicely on the instrument. So that's my aim anyway.
I'm really looking forward to it. It's something that we haven't had yet as part of the guest tutor series. We haven't had anything Scandinavian, as I call it, and I know that there's a massive scope for future guests. So if anyone's listening who might want to take part, who actually is an authentic Swede or Norwegian or Danish person, I would love to chat with you about that. For me, as a box player and a dancer, it's a whole world of exploration, and it really could completely absorb you quite easily because it's so different to anything else that we have in Europe.
Yeah.
But it's delightful stuff, particularly rhythmically.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people are a bit scared of it because of what you said. Perhaps people have an idea that it's a very traditionalist, very fiddle-driven, kind of mystical thing that's only for fiddle players, and it's very confusing and difficult. And I would like to just take some of that off the boil a little bit for people, because so many of the tunes are actually, you know, like English tradition. Some of them are really simple and they're just in G, and you know, they're very playable and might feel more familiar than people are expecting.
Perfect. Where can we go from there? I think all that's left is really to talk about where we're heading next year. But I want to, first of all, before we announce something incredibly exciting, I want to talk a little bit. We've mentioned throughout this conversation about how both of us have like moved in and out of English folk dance scene and music scene. From the conversation that we had on the phone when I set this up with you months and months ago now, we spent ages talking and kind of sharing our stories about why that was, why we make those decisions, and why it felt, you know, that we had to, and why it was best for us at the time to kind of just make different choices. That's the way that I see it. You know, I've kind of made different choices with the way I spend my time. And, you know, you've already mentioned that with the way that you made this switch to techno, and that was that was it for a while.
Yeah.
But do you want to just elaborate a little bit on some of the things that kind of led you to those decisions and kind of some of the reasons behind it?
Yeah, so there is a bit of a political slant to this, I suppose. So one thing I didn't mention in my kind of like escape to techno, and I'm going to use the word escape slightly there. There was a pull factor to another music world, but there was a little bit of a push for me as well, which was that I was coming more and more into like political awareness as I got older, and I suppose in my early 20s, sort of feminism was quite a big part of that, and I just didn't feel entirely welcome with that in a lot of circles. It was almost like funny for people. I was called a humorless feminist by multiple people at certain points on the kind of English sort of folky, especially the dance scene, kind of, oh, would you just give it up? And like, oh, we boys will be boys, we're all just having a laugh. When I would witness and maybe call out misogyny, it wasn't particularly well responded to. I didn't feel like I had a great deal of like comrades out there who were maybe willing to like oppose stuff with me.
Yeah, kind of stand with you.
Yeah, and I felt like, I suppose, staying on the kind of feminism stuff, as we've mentioned, I definitely like experienced misogyny from like older men in like not very nice ways. Being told to smile, cheer up a lot, when like, if you know me, I'm quite a cheerful person. Just quite objectifying stuff, and I got sick of it. Frankly, I got really sick of it, which is a shame because there are so many people on the folk scene that I love, that I feel close with, but there was just enough of that like slightly unsafe or unwelcoming environment that I just was like, do you know what, I don't need to be here. I'm going to go and do some other stuff, and I did, and I don't regret that at all. But there were just, I don't know why, perhaps it feels like that's prevalent on the folk scene. I felt it at uni, up in Newcastle, like male-dominated spaces, spaces where men in positions of power, like tutors and stuff, were like not great to younger women, which I think that's come out recently.
Yeah, it's being challenged at the moment, isn't it? With that,
and I'm glad that that's being challenged and that safeguarding and stuff is being put in place more, because that's absolutely what we should be doing. I don't know what it is. I don't know if there's an element of blindness, like, oh, we're all friendly here, it's the folk scene, everything's fine, we don't need to kind of examine how the patriarchy might have maybe crept into our culture, because of course it has.
Well, it's shaped it in a lot of ways, hasn't it? It's shaped the things that were collected, for instance, we
absolutely, yeah.
I'm thinking of the wonderful work of Lucy Wright. Not only her, obviously she's standing on the shoulders of other people who have brought the value of women in history to light in the folk world. But she certainly shouts about it loud and proud, and a lot of her work is revolved around women's contribution, and not just middle class women's contribution, but like working class contribution, and
totally
things that are written out of history.
And like obviously the Morris scene back when I was at uni, like the Morris ring was still for men only, and I would say to my friends that had no idea about the folk scene, oh yeah, there's this thing called the Morris ring that kind of has some kind of sway of power over this dance scene that I care about, and it's only for men. And people would say, what year is this? What are you talking about? Like, it's unbelievable that this would be the case, So I kind of became a bit more aware of kind of the sort of ridiculousness and
injustice of it,
and I just thought, you know what, I can't be bothered for now. And I'm really pleased to say, I am kind of like getting back into the folk scene now by choice, and I am seeing a lot of changes.
But on your own terms is how it looks like, it's like you're back, and where we started talking about what you and Hazel sing about and what you write about and where you're coming from with that duo. That very much feels like you came back full force with, right, okay, I've been away, I've thought about some stuff, I've got some personal stuff sorted out, and this is actually my voice, this is what I want to talk about, this is what I want to perform, this is where I'm coming from now. And I think that's a really strident move. From a personal perspective, I'm really grateful for people like yourself for taking the time to have those conversations, with me. I mean, it was a private conversation, but it really allowed me to open up about some things that I haven't opened up about, because there's a lot of fear for me about talking about things that have happened and things I still think about the way that the folk world works, and things that I've moved away from, you know, for all sorts of different reasons, and not just, you know, feminism and political choice and personal safety and stuff. It's just more as I went through my feminist awakening, if you like. That was art college, you know, which I think is a pretty bloody good place to have a feminist awakening. And it was just that thing of, oh, so, yeah, the world doesn't work in the way that I thought it did. And, you know, people who you thought were there to protect you are actually not. And it wasn't just what I was experiencing on a personal level, but it was looking at other, you know, people around me who are at a less privileged position, either from a point of view of gender or sexuality or class, or, you know, kind of where they live in the world. And, you know, you start to kind of, and because I think we're empathetic people, it's a very natural process to then start questioning why that is, and, you know, how we can make change. Yeah, I think that for me, it always has to, that from the negatives, you have to find a positive. You have to find something to go, do you know what? I've been through this and I've had these thoughts and I've talked about it with different people and like, mulled this over for years. And now what are we going to do about it? It's like, how are we going to move forward from here and try to create better places for people to grow and thrive and learn?
Yeah, which brings me on to
we can finally say... So, guys, me and Lucy have actually planned this. We've had it in the planning for a few months now, but just recently everything's come together because we have a venue and we have a date. And I'm going to let you say it, Lucy, because you're my guest.
So, one morning I had too many coffees and I messaged Mel and I was like, what if there was like a Melodeon weekend for like women and marginalised genders only, that was like specifically for those people? Would you be interested? Is that a crazy idea? And Mel immediately messaged me back and was like, yes, 100%, yeah, let's do it. And we had a phone call, and one thing led to another, and it went from being a weekend to a week.
Which we get to discover if that's the good decision or not, but
we're all in.
Fine.
And from being just for Melodeon players to like maybe all instrumentalists. And we've gone ahead and we've booked a venue, and we've got a date, and it's going to happen. I'm really excited. It's going to be in July next year, 14th to the 18th of July, I believe.
Yes, I'm looking at my notes to make sure. Absolutely. And it's Castleton Rotary Centre, which is right in the heart of the Peak District, right next to Mam Tor, if you guys know where that is. Yeah. Really gorgeous location. And the venue has got camping as well as like solid building, actual bed facilities. Yeah. So if you don't do camping, then, you know, it looks like a really nice, comfortable place that we can have to ourselves.
Yeah.
So we both were chatting, like where this, as well as this kind of, for me, this ADHD impulse of like, oh my God, I've got to do this. And I'm learning as I'm getting older. It's like, I know I always react like this, but is this actually a sensible decision that I run with? And I am absolutely in head and heart, like this is definitely where I've been, and like what I wanted to do for ages is like collaborate with somebody on you know, we're both on the same page with it, which is gorgeous. We've both experienced events that have been quite transformational in the way that we have felt as participants. So for me, it was the English Acoustic Collective Summer School, which I did twice about 12 years ago now. And you just recently did the, I want to say Carnbray, but it's not Carnbray.
No,
Crean?
It's Crean Folk Camp down in, it's actually called Crean Bottoms, which is a hilarious name.
Hilarious.
It's run by Tommy Roth, who's a dear friend.
Fantastic accordion player, yeah.
Beautiful accordion player. And yeah, me and Hazel went this summer and we didn't know what to expect. And again, a bit like the course in Sweden, it was quite transformative and not what I was expecting. I think he worked some magic that week that was really powerful for a lot of people. He managed to level out a quite disparate group of like levels, and I'm kind of using that word loosely. The idea of like advanced and intermediate and beginner kind of disintegrates the more you work together.
Yeah.
But he kind of brought everyone to a level where I felt like everybody felt like a real contributor to kind of ensemble playing. And some of the stuff that they did that week was just really profoundly empowering. And I just thought, wow, what if that kind of thing was available to me when I was younger, much less confident, like woman sitting at the back of the session thinking that she's crap, which was me for years and years and years and years.
That's been me as well. And even still to this day, I can't turn up to any session and just join in because I don't always feel involved in a particular way because of my own confidence issues or certain personalities in the room that just don't lend themselves to an inviting environment. So that was a massive influence on both of us kind of getting to this point of organising our own weekend.
Yeah. For me, some of the main aims of this week that we'll plan it a future date and kind of decide how we're going to get there. But, you know, with inspiration from these other courses that we've found really profound, is to create a space that is just for a few days, is just for women and marginalized genders, right, to just have a space to discover their own kind of contribution and like power as musicians. And I think there is some magic that happens when you perhaps don't have that like cis male presence in a space that can be quite dominating, or, you know, we're working within a patriarchy, right? And as much as you wish that you could kind of wash it off, you can't. There's an amazing event in Sheffield.
I was about to say, you know, part of you've actually experienced the joy of being in a non-male environment, haven't you, in that sense?
Yeah, so part of my inspiration is Sarah Hennigan, an amazing percussionist in Sheffield, put together this thing called the Key of She, which is a slightly misleading term because it implies that it's just for female people, but it's not. It's all marginalised genders. This kind of night in Sheffield that is a complete improv jam night. And the way that it works is you turn up and you don't have to perform. You can just come and have a cup of tea or a beer or whatever. But if you want to, you put your name and your instrument on a piece of paper, whether it's voice, shaky egg, sellotape. Someone came and played the sellotape once. You put it on a piece of paper and you put it in a hat, and they'll get jumbled up. And then Sarah will pull out 4 names. And those 4 people may never have met before, may never have played any improvisation before. You just take the stage, there's a drum kit, there's a couple of mics, there's a keyboard set up. I go with my Melodeon, and you just see what happens. And there's a little timer on, a little bell's dinged at maybe after 5 minutes, and absolute magic happens because the space has been created for people to play. It's about making a permissive space. And I think that's the real key to letting people relax and feel like they can and they belong. The improv and joining in sessions, even, you could kind of put into that, is not for the elite, and it shouldn't be. And I think, unfortunately, too often on the folk scene and in some sessions, it can feel like you're only allowed to play if you're really good and you're really elite and you know the tunes and da-da-da-da-da. And I would like to break that down a little bit and say, well, like, everybody could contribute. Like, maybe you just need to know what key it's in and play drone and be really into it.
I 100% you know, back you on all of this, because everything you've said there has just been, you know, I can relate to so much of what you've said. And it is, I mean, even just listening to that Key of She event, my stomach was tightening thinking of me in that scenario. But I have not experienced that, and I think before next year I want to come up to Sheffield at least once to experience that. Because, you know, we're going to be exploring in our event, we're going to be exploring improvisation, we're going to have space to discuss, if people want to discuss their experiences of their time in sessions or events where they've not felt welcome for whatever reason, they've not felt involved, they've not been able to feel like they can start a tune or they can play with other people. And I'm really passionate, and hopefully people who know me and know my teaching know that is like a core value of mine, is getting people to play together and getting people to believe in their abilities, even if it's as simple as playing a drone to join in with. You know, sitting in a session as a beginner or someone who's more new to their instrument doesn't mean you can't join in with the stuff you don't know, because it's not all about the melody and it's not all about playing your left hand. It's finding some way that you can contribute. And I think that that's really, really important in just learning and like human endeavour. If you're wanting to learn an instrument and get better at being on an instrument, there are so many ways that you can go about doing that, and there's usually a lot of things that people forget that they can do if they're not shown how to do it. And I think for me on the EAC summer school, the simple things were the most valuable.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what we're really both excited about, you know, facilitating workshops and learning atmosphere, but also having lots of space just to have the joy of creating together and playing together in a really nice, spongy, cushiony kind of place. Our nest. We'll create our nest. Yeah. So if that interests you, we don't currently have a name, actually, guys. We've been tossing some ideas around, and I think both of us kind of feel like the out crowd is where we're both, you know, we both liked that in our WhatsApp chat. But we're still a little bit open to ideas here. So if you're listening to this and you have an idea for a name, drop it in the comments or get in touch with me. And it would be lovely to have your contribution to that. We're going to be launching on the socials very, very soon. We will have kind of ticket dates, ticket links and everything available. But if you follow me and if you follow Lucy, check out the links below. You will definitely be hearing us when we're ready to make this announcement. But for now, if you're interested, keep the July the 14th to the 18th free. It's open to women and marginalised genders. I'm really excited. I've never done anything like this in my life, but it just feels like where a lot of my brain threads, for various different reasons, were coming together on this. I want to run an event that's really kind of empowering, and I want to support trans people. Obviously, that's just where I want to support all people, but like there's been a lot of trans issues that have been bubbling around my brain at the moment. And I just thought, yeah. And then I sort of opened my mouth and here it is. We're doing this really exciting thing, so
yeah, I'm really excited.
Well, I'm really happy to end on that note. I think it's very, very exciting. I'm very much looking forward to working with you. As I've sort of like stumbled over my words. I never thought I could be cool enough to work with Lucy Huzzard, and now I'm in my mid-30s, and it's like, you know what? Leave all that behind. That's mid-20s headspace.
I'm sorry I ever made you feel like that. No.
Oh my God, no! It was never you. Honestly, you never did anything. I think we never really even talked, and it wasn't because we were trying not to. It's just I was too nervous to even open my mouth and say, "Do you fancy a few tunes?" Because I think you were just part of a rapper side, and in my head, those are the cool kids, and I was always like not the cool kids.
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, like, it's really easy to uninvite yourself from places, and I think that is something that feels relevant to the course we're going to be putting on, like how to not uninvite yourself, and that's something that I do all the time. But also I understand that, you know, some of those teams, folk teams and rapper teams and stuff, can feel really cliquey and like, you know, a bit like a sports team. Like, how do you get an in? But just for anyone out there, I'm very approachable. I like people, I'm friendly.
Now that I know Lucy and I've actually been brave enough to open my mouth, she's the most warm, humble and like dedicated person to facilitating really good events that make you think, and kind of in a very gentle way, I think. So, and if, as I say, if you know me as a teacher, I think it's going to work really well. We've got very similar minds aligned, and I'm very excited to see you facilitate.
Likewise.
Yeah, it's going to be a bit like facilitators on show, but that's all part of it. I need to sort of like deal with that and just go with it. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you, Lucy, for joining me. Just a reminder that you can find Lucy's links down below. You can find Lucy and Hazel links, and that new album that's upcoming, we'll have a link to that. The Polska weekend with Ellison, there'll be a link to that, as well as links to both our socials, so you can keep up to date with this wonderful Castleton. We don't know what we're calling it, the out crowd. Maybe we will end up going with that as opposed to the in crowd. But yeah, let us know, guys, if you've got any suggestions of names. And yeah, I look forward to what you're going to do on your Melinar. People can be able to get that on replay via my Patreon. Anything you want to end on there?
Oh, just thanks so much for having me. It's been such a nice chat. It's just great chatting to you. I feel like we have a lot in common in terms of our experience of the folk scene, and it feels very validating to have conversations with another box player who kind of gets it. Yeah, I really appreciate that. And thank you for letting me talk about techno, because I didn't expect that, but I do love to go on about it.
Oh my God. I could have talked to you a lot more about it, because I think part of the joy for me on this podcast is to really get to know the person behind what you see on stage. So that is if that's a massive part of your life, that's the kind of stuff I want to talk about. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. If you've enjoyed this podcast with Lucy and you would like more content from her, don't forget to check out the links below where you can find the extended episode of this podcast, and you can also get Lucy's Melinar, where you can learn a gorgeous Swedish tune called Frejas Hymne. My guest tutor on Patreon this month in November is Martin Ellison. I'm so excited about this because I've been egging him on for months and months and months, and thank you so much, Martin, for saying yes over and over again. I had to really egg you on to do it, and I'm so excited to come up and visit you. This month's Melinar, I'm going up to see Martin. We are going to be streaming live from Martin's living room. The idea that I have proposed to Martin, and he's gone ahead with it, is run a masterclass, a sort of deconstructed masterclass where I will be his pupil, and I will basically just let him play and do his thing, and we'll be working around a tune. I'm going to press play and pause with him and get him to stop at points where I can see what he's doing, or try and work out what he's doing. And we're going to try to work out just how Martin Ellison plays like Martin Ellison, which is a question I have had several times over the years that I've been teaching, and particularly since Martin has been posting so much more on his Facebook and his YouTube channel. People really love his playing. If you're not familiar with his playing, go and check it out. Like, it's so much fun. He is one of the real trad stars of the English scene, and I'm just super excited to spend more time in his company and in his playing. I'm really excited to absorb all of that and also be able to share it with you guys and help Martin to communicate the way that he does stuff. You can become a part of Martin's Melinar. I'm joining him live on Zoom on the 26th of November. That will be live at 7 p.m. UK time. Do come and join us. It's going to be a really fun evening. And if you can't make the live, you'll be able to get the recording afterwards. This will be the final guest tutor of the 2024 series, but it's not going to be the last. I have got guest tutors lined up already for next year, so we'll be continuing with a series 2. I just want to take a moment to say a massive thank you to everybody who supports my work on Patreon. If you've joined up just recently, or if you've been one of the long haulers who've been there since 2020 when I started it, thank you. None of this would be possible without your support, and I pay my tutors, I pay myself, so all of your money goes directly to supporting independent artists. So thank you so much. If you would like to sign up to support my work and the work of others, you can check out the links down below, always and forevermore. Just a few parish notices from me of things that I've got up and coming in my diary. On the 23rd of November, I've got my Improvers course at the Stables in Milton Keynes. We do run a box loan scheme there, so if you don't have your own instrument, then you are welcome to attend and we can give you an instrument. That will be 10 till 3, and we're looking at starting to move across the rows and use a lot more chords and basses on our left hand. So if you have already started, maybe you've done the L1 course or you are at the improver level, then you are very welcome to attend the L2 course. Looking a little bit further ahead, on the 7th of December, the Birmingham Accordion Centre have invited me to teach a festive Melodeon workshop and do a concert in the evening. So that will be the workshop from 3 till 5, and we're going to be just looking at some really nice festive tunes on the Melodeon, doing some simple arrangements and looking at some fun left-hand stuff. And then there'll be a bring and share supper with a session from 5:30 till 7 p.m, and then from 7:30 to 9 p.m, I will be playing a solo concert, which will probably include some Christmas songs that we can sing along with as well. There's a mince pie and a glass of mulled wine included in your ticket. The details I'll leave of that below, and you can contact the Birmingham Accordion Centre directly to book in. That's it from me this month. Thank you so much for listening and tuning in. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and leave me a 5-star review if you're listening anywhere else. I'd really appreciate it. Also, I'm not on Facebook anymore. If you've seen my recent YouTube video, I've been suspended from my account due to a hijacker. So thanks very much, internet. So I am no longer on Facebook, so I'd appreciate any shares of this on Facebook. That would be amazing. And anything else that I put out in the world, I'm relying on you guys now to do the legwork for me there. I will see you again next month with my wonderful guest tutor, Martin Ellison. Cheers, guys. Bye.